So I decided to downsize my $38,000 camera for something much simpler. Now, to understand why I would do this, to understand why I would ever need a $38,000 camera to begin with, it requires a little bit of explanation. But first, I've got a quick announcement. So the other day while recording a podcast, I realized that something was missing. Now, if you've been following the podcast for some time, you know that for the past year and a half, I've had one goal and one goal only. I want to have The Rock on the show. I do bring up The Rock in every podcast. He's not picking up. He's not answering my phone calls.
Man, who's this Matt dude?
The Rock tweeted at me. No, this is weird. So after a lot of thinking, I came to the realization, as I'm sure you are right now, that I needed one thing and one thing only, and that's a jingle. So I'm holding the first ever Get the Rock on Matt's podcast jingle competition, trademark, all rights reserved, and I want to hear from you. I'm looking for artists and musicians to create their best 5 to 10 second jingle and submit it to hello@mattdiavella.com. The winning jingle will play every single time I mention The Rock on the podcast, and that's quite often. Sad to say that it's a bit too much. And of course, every great jingle competition needs a great jingle.
Get the Rock on Matt's podcast. Jingle competition.
Was that great or what? I want to thank Elliot Vaughn. He's a listener from the UK who asked to help. He's the one that inspired this idea to begin with. So if you want to submit to the competition, we've already got our jingle for the jingle competition, but if you want to submit for the actual competition, I want to hear from you. Send in your jingle to hello@mattdiavella.com. I cannot wait to hear from you. And now, why I decided to downsize my very expensive camera. Over the years, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the right cameras and gear to purchase, even before I called myself a minimalist. Camera equipment gets expensive very fast, and early on, I had no money. But I've always believed that you need to invest in yourself and your business if you want it to grow. So I continued to fork up the money, even when I didn't have any. I remember borrowing $3,000 from my parents because I couldn't afford my first DSLR. A few people told me that I was crazy, that the camera I had was just fine, but the investment always paid off. And eventually I started to get bigger and bigger projects. I nearly shit my pants the first time I landed a 10K gig, but it became more and more common. It made sense to get a high-end camera that would fit well with these large budget projects. So I made the biggest purchase of my life 2 years ago and bought a Red Epic W. So I bought a very expensive camera. I made a huge investment in my business because I was going to be focusing more and more on high-end client work. I was going to be working with bigger brands, tech companies, and startups who had budgets to execute on really great and ambitious stories. But then, a year and a half after I got the camera, I decided to take my business in an entirely different direction. Instead of creating client work and reeling in big budget projects, I would be making YouTube videos and podcast episodes. This is a new thing for me. I'm just getting started, but I'm excited. That meant that I needed a lot more content in a shorter period of time. Now, it didn't take very long for me to realize that there was a problem, that this Red Epic W with its 8Ks wasn't actually supporting my current work. It was actually slowing me down. And that's the core reason why I sold the camera: speed. The Red creates a stunning image, but it's not the camera for one-man run-and-gun YouTube videos. In order to create content consistently, you need to remove as much friction as possible, and the Red caused a lot of friction. Ergonomically, it's heavy and a bit clunky. The batteries are massive and only last an hour. I had to record audio and video separately and sync in post-production. And post-production was a complete headache. Red produces what's called a raw file, meaning that you have a lot of data and a lot of manipulation to create beautiful looking imagery. The problem, the file sizes are enormous and they really will slow down even some of the fastest computers. I was having a lot of issues simply exporting files out of Final Cut. My computer would crash or become unresponsive. It even froze up while making this video. So you have these files that are very, very large, and that actually will affect the way that you produce a video. So when I'm going out to shoot B-roll or establishing footage, I might not shoot as much as I think I need because the file sizes are really big. I don't want to have to deal with all that footage. I don't want to have to deal with storing all those files or buying those extra hard drives. Now, many of you might be thinking, well, Matt, you're a minimalist filmmaker. That shouldn't be a problem. You should be shooting only 1 or 2 shots for every video. You should always know exactly what you're going to need to get. But that's not exactly true with filmmaking or any creative art. If you're writing a book, you don't just write 200 pages and then stop, then you're done. Usually you'll write a 500-page book and then you'll curate and whittle it down to find the story. It's the same exact thing with filmmaking. I shoot hundreds of hours of footage for a documentary, and then I curate and whittle it down. I chisel the marble until I find what's underneath. And the red was actually holding me back in that regard. I didn't want to go out and shoot because I knew that eventually I'd have to deal with all of that data. So I needed to find the perfect balance between quality and speed. I didn't want to sacrifice on quality, but I also needed a more efficient workflow. So I ended up on the Canon C200. So it's not always about upgrades. It's not always about getting that next version. It's about finding the tool that's right for the job. And for now, this new tool is going to allow me to create videos more quickly, more efficiently. It's going to reduce a whole lot of friction, and that means I'll be able to make more videos, which is good news for the both of us. Thanks for watching this video. Again, don't forget to submit to the Get the Rock on Matt's podcast Jingle competition. It's going to be closing in a couple weeks, so get those submissions in. Send them in to hello@mattdavella.com. I can't wait to hear from you, and I'll see you soon.
Get the Rock on Matt's podcast. Jingle competition.